Hello, hi. Welcome to the Astrology Forecast for the week ahead. If you didn't already know this, I'm a huge nerd-ass when it comes to astrology, and it has become the lens through which I process my life. It's not a tool to blame other people or make excuses for shitty behavior. Astrology only reflects back to us what we are currently experiencing. As above, so below. When we know the astrological weather, we can be better equipped for the themes that are showing up in our lives. If you know it's going to rain, you might opt for boots instead of sandals. Your choice either way, but at least your decision is informed. Astrology gives us that same opportunity. I've been studying astrology for the last decade, and I wanted to have a separate space for us to talk about it here on the podcast. I might reference some of the language in our episodes, and my hope is to create more familiarity for all of us to share this language together. I know we all come from different backgrounds, and that's okay, and I welcome all levels of understanding because I want to level the playing field with this part of the podcast. Some of us might not resonate with astrology at all, and that's okay. So just take what resonates and leave what doesn't. With that, let's get into the astrology for the week of May 27th to June 2nd. Our theme, and that is pressure. The kind that builds underneath the surface of our relationships, our stability, and the way we relate to belonging. This week, we're moving through 3 major transits that all seem to be speaking to that same storyline, but coming from different angles. Mars is in Taurus, and it is square to Pluto in Aquarius. So this brings pressure around stability, control, and collective change, where personal safety starts bumping up against larger systems and group dynamics that are shifting whether we want them to or not. Saturn in Aries is square to Venus in Cancer, and this is bringing a relationship reality check. It's highlighting where emotional needs, attachment patterns, and responsibility to self are out of sync with what is actually sustainable in our connections. And then we close the week with a full moon in Sagittarius, which tends to bring emotional clarity, truth-telling, a widening perspective, especially around what we believe, what we've been telling ourselves, and what we are ready to outgrow. So, if the last few weeks have felt like tension building in these areas, you're not imagining it. So, what we're going to do is go through each rising sign and see exactly where these transits are showing up in your life. If you don't know your rising sign, you can listen for your sun sign, but I would leave the parts of the forecast that are speaking to specific areas of your life and simply take the energetic that is at play and apply that to your core identity and essence. So, with that, let's get into it. We start the zodiac with Aries and we end with Pisces. So I'm going to go in that order. You can jump ahead to your personal rising sign. And something that I think is super fun too is to listen for our friends, our family, our partners, just to have a better understanding of what they are experiencing and how we can show up for them. So with that, Aries, This is a week where pressure builds across money, identity, home, and belief systems all at once. Like different parts of your life asking you to stop pretending everything fits the way it used to. There's a tension between your personal resources, income, and self-worth. That's the second house part. And something shifting in your friend groups, networks, and long-term social direction. That's the 11th house part. So this can show up as power dynamics in friendships around money, effort, or value. Questioning whether certain groups actually align with your worth. Pressure to restart what you will and won't invest in. Feeling pulled between financial stability and social obligations or expectations. At its core, this is about reclaiming your value outside of group validation. Something in your social world is pushing you against how you define your worth. And you might feel the urge to tighten control over your time, energy, and resources as a result of that. Saturn in your first house is asking you to grow into a more defined version of yourself, more self-responsible, more grounded, less shaped by external approval. But Venus in the fourth house is pulling you toward emotional safety, family patterns, old attachment dynamics, the desire to feel held, familiar, emotionally secure. That can look like emotional heaviness around home or family, questioning what safety actually means, feeling like you're outgrowing old emotional containers, struggling between independence and emotional comfort. Can you become someone who supports yourself emotionally without abandoning your need for softness and connection? This is about reparenting yourself while still honoring your need for care. The full moon brings clarity around your mental world versus your belief system. The sun transiting your third house highlights daily thinking patterns, conversations, overanalysis, immediate environment. The moon transiting your ninth house asks you to zoom out. What do you actually believe? What story are you living inside of? Where are you ready for expansion or truth? This can show up as a conversation that changes your perspective, sudden clarity about your direction or your purpose, release of an old mental loop or narrative, the desire to step outside your usual environment mentally or physically. The emotional shift is, I can't keep thinking my way through this. I need a bigger truth. All of these three transits are pointing to the same theme. You are redefining worth, belonging, and truth simultaneously. And underneath it all is a quiet but persistent question. Where are you still trying to feel safe by shrinking your truth, your needs, or your sense of self? This is not just pressure to change your external circumstances. It's pressure to become internally aligned enough that your life can reorganize around who you are now, not who you used to be. Okay? Big themes this week, Aries. I'm excited for you. Okay, Taurus. Hi, Taurus. This is a week where identity, direction, communication, and emotional security are all under pressure at the same time. It can feel like you're being asked to change how you show up in the world while also confronting what you've been holding on to internally for safety. There is a push-pull between your identity, body, and personal drive with Mars sitting in your first house, and your career, public role, or life direction with Pluto sitting in Aquarius in your 10th house. This can feel like pressure to redefine how you show up in work or leadership, conflict between personal desire and external expectations, frustration with authority figures or systems, a sense that your direction is changing, whether you're ready or not, intensified ambition or burnout from trying to control the outcomes. Mars in your first house wants autonomy and direction. Pluto in the 10th is reshaping your path, but at a deep structural level. This is a moment where you feel like you can't keep up the act if it isn't authentic anymore. Something about your identity is being reworked through pressure coming from your external world. Saturn in your 12th house is squaring Venus in your 3rd house. This is a quieter, more internal emotional tension that's coming up. Saturn in the 12th brings subconscious processing, isolation, or emotional withdrawal, old grief, fear, or unresolved patterns that are surfacing. Venus in the 3rd is communication, conversations, siblings, peers, daily interactions, the need for intimate connection. This square can show up as difficulty expressing emotional truth clearly, feeling mentally disconnected while emotionally overloaded, withdrawing instead of communicating needs, overthinking relationships or conversations, feeling unseen or misunderstood in subtle ways. There can also be a sense of, I don't know how to say what I actually feel yet. The work here is learning to bring unconscious emotional material into clearer, more honest communication, slowly and safely. The full moon is happening in your 8th house, opposite to your sun in your 2nd house. The full moon highlights the axis of shared resources versus personal stability. The sun in the 2nd house is about money, self-worth, personal security, and values. The moon in the 8th house brings emotional depth, intimacy and vulnerability, shared finances and resources, and psychological release and transformation. This can show up as clarity around money, debt, or financial entanglements, emotional breakthroughs in intimacy or trust, letting go of attachment patterns that are rooted in security, realizing where you've been over-identifying with control or self-reliance, and emotional intensity around value, worth, and dependence. The deeper question is, what am I holding on to for safety that is actually asking to be transformed? All 3 of these transits are working together around the themes of control, identity, and emotional security. Underneath that is a quiet restructuring. You are being asked to release old definitions of safety, so a more honest version of stability can emerge. This week is less about forcing clarity and more about noticing where your current systems of control, communication, and self-worth are no longer aligned with who you're becoming. Okay, Taurus, big stuff, but I'm excited for us. Gemini. Hi, honey. This is a week where inner pressure, belief systems, friendships, and relationships are all quietly reorganizing at once. A lot of what shifts now isn't fully visible yet. It's more psychological, relational, and deeply identity based. There's a strong undercurrent between your subconscious world, rest, and hidden emotional processing with Mars in your 12th house, and your belief systems, worldview, and sense of meaning with Pluto in your 9th house. This can feel like mental or emotional burnout from overthinking meaning or direction. It's suppressed frustration surfacing in subtle or indirect ways. Internal pressure to figure something out, spiritually or philosophically. Tension between surrendering versus trying to control understanding. And old fears or unconscious patterns colliding with your evolving beliefs. Mars in the 12th house is working behind the scenes. Anger, desire, or urgency that isn't fully expressed outwardly, where Pluto in the 9th intensifies your need for truth and meaning. So it can feel like something inside of me is shifting, but I can't fully articulate it yet. There is an invitation here to slow down enough to let insight surface without forcing clarity. Saturn is transiting your 11th house and it is squaring Venus in your 2nd house. This transit is bringing a reality check between your social world, your friendships, and your long-term goals, Saturn in the 11th, and your money, self-worth, and personal values, Venus in the 2nd. That can show up as reevaluating friendships based on alignment or reciprocity, feeling distance or responsibility with friend groups, tension between belonging and financial or energetic self-worth, questioning what and who is actually worth your time and energy, feeling like you need to grow up around how you invest in community. Venus in the 2nd wants comfort, stability, and to feel valued. Saturn squaring Venus from your 11th house asks, are your relationships aligned with your long-term direction and your actual worth? This can be a pruning socially and energetically. The full moon is illuminating the axis of self versus relationship. So the sun is transiting your 1st house right now, which is identity, personal direction, and how you're showing up in the world. And the full moon in your 7th house brings up partnerships, one-on-one relationships, projection and emotional mirroring, and relational clarity. This can show up as relationship dynamics coming into full awareness, important conversations or emotional revelations with a partner or a person who's super close to you, seeing how you've been showing up in relationships more clearly, or a turning point in how you relate to others versus how you relate to yourself. The core emotional question is, am I abandoning myself to maintain connection? Or can I stay fully myself inside of this relationship? Something about how you relate to others is becoming clearer, and that clarity may shift how you see yourself in the process. All these transits ultimately are working together around inner alignment, relational truth, and value clarity. Underneath that, the central theme is you are learning the difference between connection that reflects your truth and connection that asks you to shrink it. This week isn't just about relationships changing. It's about you becoming more visible to yourself in how you relate to everyone else. Okay, Gemini, big stuff this week. You got this, baby. Okay, Cancer. Hi, Cancer babies. This is a week where social pressure, emotional depth, identity, and exhaustion all start interacting in a way that makes it harder to ignore what's been building under the surface. Something in your external world is pushing against your internal limits. There's intensity between your friendships, community, and long-term goals with Mars in your 11th house, and your emotional depth, intimacy, shared resources, and psychological undercurrents with Pluto in your 8th house. This can feel like power dynamics surfacing in friendships or group settings, emotional entanglements becoming more intense or complicated, conflict between belonging and emotional self-protection, feeling pulled into group dynamics that feel psychologically charged, confronting trust, loyalty, or control issues with your social world. Mars in the 11th wants movement through connection and group alignment. Pluto in your 8th house wants emotional truth, depth, and control over vulnerability. That can feel like something in my social world is triggering something much deeper in me. The invitation here is to notice where connection is activating old patterns of trust, attachment, or emotional survival. With Saturn in your 10th house squaring Venus in your 1st house, there is a major recalibration between your public life, career direction, and responsibility with those 10th house themes, and your identity, self-expression, and personal needs with the 1st house themes. This can show up as pressure in your career or life direction that impacts how you see yourself. Feeling like external responsibilities are reshaping your identity. Tension between how you want to show up and what is expected of you. Increased awareness of how others perceive you. Difficulty balancing personal needs with professional obligations. Ultimately, Venus in the 1st wants ease, self-expression, and alignment with your own rhythms. Saturn squaring Venus from the 10th asks, can you step into responsibility without abandoning yourself in the process? This is about learning to hold authority in your life without losing softness or self-recognition. The full moon is highlighting the axis of daily life, health, work, and routine in the 6th house with rest, subconscious processing, and emotional withdrawal with the sun in the 12th house. This can manifest as burnout or exhaustion, becoming harder to ignore, emotional release tied to work, obligations, or daily structure, heightened need for rest or nervous system recovery, and realizations about what is draining you versus what is sustaining you, as well as clarity around habits, health, or emotional overload. The 12th house sun can feel internal, foggy, and emotionally heavy. And the moon in the 6th house brings it into practical awareness. The core question is, What am I carrying internally that my daily life is no longer able to support? Something that has been held privately is now asking for adjustment in your external rhythms. All three transits are moving through emotional depth, responsibility, identity, and burnout. Underneath all of that, you are being asked to stop overextending yourself in silence, emotionally, socially, and professionally. This week is bringing awareness to where your internal world and your external responsibilities are no longer in balance and where something needs to be simplified, supported, or restructured so that you can actually stay well inside the routines of your life. Leo, hello, baby. This week is a week where relationship dynamics, public direction, inner emotional patterns, and creative expression are all tightening at once. It can feel like pressure is building between how you're seen in the world, what you believe, and what you're quietly carrying and working through inside. There is intensity between your career, public role, and direction with Mars in your 10th house and your one-on-one relationships and partnerships with Pluto in your 7th house. This can show up as power dynamics in romantic or professional relationships, tension between ambition and relational harmony, feeling challenged or confronted by a partner or collaborator, increased visibility in your work, bringing pressure into your relationships, and also conflict between your personal goals and someone else's expectations. Mars in the 10th is pushing you to act, to lead, and to move forward publicly. Pluto in the 7th intensifies relational dynamics, sometimes through control, projection, or emotional depth. This can feel like the way I'm showing up in the world is changing, and my relationships are reacting to it. The deeper lesson here is learning where compromise supports connection and where it compromises your direction. Saturn is also transiting your 9th house, squaring Venus in the 12th house. This is a quieter but more deep and internal tension between belief systems, direction and growth, and your subconscious emotional world, your rest, and your hidden attachment patterns. This can show up as uncertainty about direction, purpose, or meaning. Old emotional patterns surfacing in subtle or private ways. Difficulty accessing clarity or trust in your path. Feeling disconnected from inspiration or faith temporarily. And hidden fears affecting your ability to feel ease or joy. Venus in the 12th can hold unconscious longing, nostalgia, or unspoken emotional needs. Saturn in the 9th house is squaring that and asking, what do you actually believe? And is it grounded in truth or avoidance? This is a process of confronting internal narratives that quietly shape your direction without you fully realizing it. The full moon is bringing clarity to your self-expression and your joy from the 5th house and how that impacts your friendship community and long-term vision with the sun in the 11th house. This can manifest as emotional clarity around friendships or group dynamics, realization of where you feel seen versus unseen, shifts in creative direction or personal expression, tension between individuality and belonging, a moment of truth about what or who supports your authentic self-expression. The full moon in the 5th house wants authenticity, creativity, and pleasure. The sun in the 11th house is highlighting collective roles, social identity, and future-oriented goals. The emotional question here becomes, where am I abandoning my joy in order to belong? And where am I meant to be more fully seen for who I am? Something about self-expression and belonging is coming into balance through emotional clarity. All of these transits are speaking to tension between visibility, belonging, belief, and emotional truth. Underneath all of that is a central theme that you are learning where your growth requires differentiation and where your belonging requires authenticity. This week highlights where you may have been adjusting yourself in order to maintain connection or direction, and where you're now being asked to bring more honesty into both, which is wild because that speaks directly to this week's podcast episode. So this week's episode might just be for the Leos. You got this, Leo. I'm proud of you. I'm excited for you. You got this. Virgo, hi angels. This is a week where belief systems, work patterns, emotional safety, and social alignment are all under pressure at once. This can feel like your internal world and your external responsibilities are pulling you in different directions, and something has to recalibrate. Mars in your 9th house is in a tough aspect, squaring Pluto in your 6th house. There's tension here between your belief systems, direction and expansion, and your daily work, routines, health, and responsibilities. This might show up for you as frustration with work routines that feel misaligned with your bigger purpose, burnout from trying to force meaning into overstructured systems, pressure to fix or control daily life while questioning bigger direction, conflict between faith and vision and your more practical demands, and an intensified drive to change habits, work, or health patterns. Mars in the 9th wants truth, expansion, and movement. Pluto in the 6th demands restructuring of daily life, habits, and control over your systems. This can feel like I can't keep living a routine that doesn't match what I believe anymore. The deeper theme is aligning your daily life with your evolving truth, even if that requires disruption at first. Saturn in your 8th house is squaring Venus in your 11th house. This is a reality check around intimacy, emotional depth, and shared resources versus your friendships, community, and long-term goals. This can show up as emotional distance or seriousness in friendships, reevaluating who you trust within your social circle, tension between vulnerability and belonging, feeling unsupported or emotionally separate in group spaces, confronting fears around dependency or emotional exposure. Venus in the 11th wants ease, connection, social harmony. Saturn is challenging that, asking, where are your relationships actually safe enough for emotional honesty? And where are they not? This transit often brings clarity around which connections feel mutually real and which feel emotionally limited or conditional. The full moon is sitting in your 4th house, opposing the sun in the 10th house. This full moon highlights the axis of home, emotional foundations, and inner life versus career, visibility, and direction. This can manifest as emotional realizations about work-life balance, shifts in living situations or family dynamics, internal or external, feeling the emotional cost of ambition or responsibility, clarity about what actually supports your nervous system, tension between public roles and private needs. The moon in the fourth house is pulling you inward toward safety and emotional grounding. The sun in the 10th house is emphasizing your visibility, your responsibility, and your achievements. The question here is, what am I building externally, and does it feel safe internally? Something about your foundation is asking to be honored and not overridden. All three of these transits are restructuring your relationship to meaning, stability, emotional depth, and responsibility. Underneath everything is a central tension that is asking you to build a life that supports both your ambition and your emotional reality, and not one at the expense of the other. This week is highlighting where you're overfunctioning, overcommitting, over-adapting, and how that has pulled you away from what actually feels sustainable. Okay, Virgo, you got this. Big stuff this week, but you're the one. Okay, Libra. This week brings intensity around emotional depth, creativity, relationships, and direction. There's a strong push-pull between intimacy and expression, partnership and ambition, and what you think versus what you're coming to understand as truth. There is a pressure building between your emotional depth, intimacy, trust, and shared resources with Mars in your 8th house, and your creativity, self-expression, romance, and joy with Pluto sitting in your 5th house. This can show up as intense emotional reactions in dating or romantic situations, power dynamics surfacing in intimacy or attachment, fear of vulnerability interfering with expression or play, and jealousy, obsession, or emotional fixation patterns coming up. Mars in the 8th house wants emotional honesty and depth. Pluto in the 5th intensifies how you express yourself, love, and create, sometimes to the point of pressure or compulsion. This can feel like what I feel is too deep for what I'm trying to express lightly. The growth edge is learning how to stay emotionally present without losing access to joy, expression, or spontaneity. There is a major relationship and visibility checkpoint between your partnerships with Saturn in the 7th house and your career, public image, and direction with Venus sitting in your 10th house right now. This can show up for you in seriousness or pressure in romantic or business relationships, tension between your relationship needs and professional responsibilities, feeling evaluated or judged through partnerships or visibility, delays, boundaries, or clarity issues in commitments, and a redefinition of what successful relationships actually look like. Venus in the 10th house wants harmony, recognition, and alignment in how you are seen. Saturn transiting your 7th house is challenging that, asking which relationships are actually sustainable and which ones require you to abandon yourself to maintain them. This transit brings clarity around commitment, standards, and relational responsibility. The full moon is illuminating your 3rd house, which is your mind, communication, and your daily thought patterns. And it is opposing the sun in the 9th house, which is your belief systems, your meaning, and your long-term direction. This opposition can show up as important conversations that shift your perspective, realization or truth coming through communication, mental overwhelm, resolving into clarity, tension between facts, details, and bigger meaning, decisions around learning, writing, teaching, or direction. The moon in your third house is highlighting what is happening in your immediate environment and thought loops. The sun in your ninth house is expanding perspective and challenging limited narratives. The core question here becomes, what truth am I ready to think, speak, or believe differently now? Something you've been mentally circling is ready to land into clarity. All three transits are moving through the themes of intimacy, expression, partnership, and meaning making. Underneath that, you are learning where emotional intensity can deepen your life and where it has been limiting your ability to express, connect, and move forward freely. This week is asking for honesty in what you feel, clarity in what you believe, and maturity in how you relate to others while staying connected to yourself. All right, Libra, big week. You got this. Scorpio, hello. How are we? This week brings pressure around your relationships, your home dynamics, work-life structure, beliefs, and financial, emotional security. There's a strong theme of what am I carrying alone versus what is actually shared. There is intensity building between your relationships, partnerships, and one-on-one dynamics with Mars in your seventh house, and your home, family, systems, emotional foundations, and inner safety with Pluto in your fourth house. This can show up for you in power struggles in close relationships that connect to family or childhood patterns, emotional triggers in partnerships that feel deeper than the present moment, conflict between relationship needs and home private life needs, old emotional conditioning surfacing through current dynamics, heightened sensitivity around trust, control, or emotional safety. Mars in the seventh pushes direct confrontation or action in relationships, and Pluto in the fourth brings deep emotional undercurrents from the past into the present. This can feel like this isn't just about the relationship, it's about something older that I'm still carrying. The growth edge is separating present day dynamics from inherited emotional patterns without ignoring either side. There's also a tension happening between your daily work, health, and responsibilities with Saturn in your sixth house and your belief systems, expansion, and long-term direction with Venus in your ninth house. This might come up for you through burnout or restriction in daily routines that are conflicting with your desire for growth. It might look like frustration between practical obligations and a bigger life vision, questioning meaning or purpose in your work, feeling limited while also wanting expansion or freedom, restructuring habits to better align with beliefs or values. Venus in the ninth wants inspiration, meaning, openness. Saturn in your sixth house is challenging that and asking what actually supports life on a daily level and what only feels meaningful in theory. This transit pushes you to ground your beliefs into lived structure and not just vision. The full moon in the second house is opposing the sun in your eighth house. The full moon illuminates the part of your chart that deals with self-worth, income, and personal resources versus the shared resources, intimacy, debt, and emotional entanglement that the sun is illuminating. This can show up for you as clarity around financial independence versus shared dependence, emotional realizations tied to attachment or obligation, shifts in income, spending, or self-worth narratives, tension between what is yours versus what is shared with others, and releasing old emotional or financial entanglements. The moon in the second house is highlighting what you need to feel stable and secure. The sun in the eighth is bringing awareness to what you're emotionally or materially entangled with. The question is, where am I giving away my stability in exchange for emotional or relational attachment? Something about value emotional, or financial is coming into clarity. All three of these transits are restructuring your relationships to attachment, stability, responsibility, and emotional inheritance. Underneath everything is a core shift. You are learning where emotional intensity creates depth and connection, and where it has quietly undermined your stability. This week asks for grounded clarity, what you can sustain, what you need to release, and where your sense of security actually comes from. Okay, Scorpio. Big stuff, but you got this. Sagittarius. Hello, hello. This week brings intensity across the areas of your life which deal with daily stress, communication patterns, intimacy, creativity, identity, and relationships. It can feel like your inner world and your closest dynamics are both demanding honesty at the same time. There is a pressure building between your daily work, routines, health, and responsibilities with Mars in your sixth house, and your mind, communication, thinking patterns, and immediate environment with Pluto in your third house. This can show up as mental overload tied to work or daily obligations, conflict or intensity in communication at work or in close environments, feeling mentally on edge or overstimulated, obsessive thinking patterns around tasks, productivity, or problem solving, and power struggles through communication or information. Mars in the sixth house wants efficiency and action through structure. Pluto in the third intensifies thoughts and communications, sometimes creating mental pressure or fixation. This can feel like my mind and my responsibilities are running too intensely to ignore. The growth edge is slowing down reactive thinking so you can respond instead of spiraling or over controlling outcomes. There is also a deep emotional and relational reality check between your creativity, joy, dating, and self expression with Saturn in your fifth house, and your intimacy, vulnerability, shared resources, and emotional entanglements with Venus in your eighth house. This can show up as seriousness or emotional weight in dating or romantic dynamics, fear of vulnerability, blocking joy or creative expression, emotional intensity and intimacy that feels limiting or heavy, reevaluating trust, attachment, or emotional investment, and tension between wanting fun connection and fearing emotional consequences. Venus in the eighth house wants depth, merging, emotional closeness. Saturn in the fifth house is challenging that and asking, can you stay open to joy and expression without losing yourself in emotional intensity? The transit often reveals where love, attraction, or creativity has become entangled with fear, control, or emotional overinvestment. The full moon is illuminating the area of self-identity, needs, and embodiment in your first house versus relationships, partnerships, and external reflection with the sun in your seventh house. This can come up as emotional clarity about who you are becoming, relationship dynamics coming to a head or reaching a turning point, heightened sensitivity in one-on-one relationships, realization of where you've been over accommodating others, and a desire to assert yourself more directly. The moon in the first house is pulling attention toward self-definition. The sun in your seventh house is highlighting how you relate to others and how others see you. The question here becomes, where am I adjusting myself for the relationship? And where am I ready to stand as myself within it? Something about identity and partnership is becoming clearer and more emotionally honest. All three of these transits are activating themes of mind, identity, intimacy, and relational balance. Underneath all of that is a central recalibration. You are learning where your nervous system, your relationships, and your emotional intensity need clearer boundaries, and where you've been merging too quickly or holding too tightly. This week asks for self-awareness in how you communicate, how you connect, and how you define yourself inside your closest dynamics. Okay, Sag. That's good stuff. You got it. Capricorn. Hi, hi, hi. This week activates themes of creativity, self-worth, home, relationships, daily stress, and emotional burnout. There is a strong undercurrent of pressure between what you value, what you're building, and what your nervous system can actually sustain. There's intensity building between your creativity, romance, self-expression, and joy with Mars in your 5th house, and your money, self-worth, values, and stability with Pluto in your 2nd house. This can show up as pressure to turn creativity into productivity or income, emotional intensity around money, worth, or validation, control or fear patterns affecting romantic or creative expression, feeling like joy is costly or has consequences, power struggles around resources or self-value. Mars in the 5th wants expression, risk, and creative life force. Pluto in the 2nd brings deep transformation around worth, survival, and control. This can feel like, I want to express myself freely, but something in me is tightening around worth, money, or stability. The growth edge here is learning that creativity doesn't have to justify itself to be valid. There is also a reality check that is happening in relationships and your emotional foundation, with your home, inner world, and emotional safety being activated with Saturn in your 4th house, and your partnerships, commitments, and one-on-one dynamics being activated with Venus in your 7th house. This can show up for you in emotional distance or seriousness in relationships, tension between needing space and safety and maintaining connection, family or home responsibilities affecting partnerships, feeling unsupported emotionally in close relationships, reevaluating long-term relation commitments. Venus in the 7th wants harmony, closeness, and mutual care. Saturn in the 4th challenges that, asking, what do you actually need to feel emotionally safe? And are your relationships supporting that or destabilizing it? This transit exposes where emotional needs and relational expectations are out of sync. The full moon is activating the area of your chart that deals with rest, subconscious processing, and emotional release in your 12th house, and the area of your chart that deals with work, routine, health, and responsibility with the sun in the 6th house. This can show up as burnout or exhaustion surfacing clearly, emotional overwhelm tied to work or daily life, need for rest, withdrawal, or solitude, subconscious emotions rising into awareness, and realization of what habits or obligations are unstable, and realization of what habits or obligations are not sustainable. The moon in the 12th house is pulling you inward toward rest and emotional integration. The sun in the 6th house is emphasizing function, productivity, and daily structure. The question becomes, what am I carrying internally that my daily life is no longer equipped to hold? Something hidden or suppressed is asking for release so your system can reset. All three of these transits are restructuring your relationship to joy, worth, emotional safety, and sustainability. Underneath all of that is a central theme. You are being asked to stop over prioritizing productivity or stability at the expense of joy, rest, and emotional honesty. This week is highlighting where you have been pushing through discomfort and where your system is now asking for something more sustainable. Okay, Capricorn, big stuff. You got this. Aquarius, hi, honey. This week is activating identity shifts, emotional foundations, daily habits, health patterns, creativity, and your sense of belonging. There is a strong push-pull between who you're becoming, what you need internally, and how you show up in your everyday life. There is intensity building between your home, emotional foundation, family systems, and inner world with Mars in your fourth house, and your identity, body, self-expression, and personal direction with Pluto in your first house. This can show up as emotional volatility surfacing in private spaces or family dynamics, feeling personally on edge or internally activated, tension between who you are and what your emotional history shaped you to be, pressure to assert yourself while still processing deep emotional material, identity shifts triggered by home or family related experiences. Mars in the fourth house can stir up old emotional patterns and defensive reactions. And Pluto in the first house can intensify identity transformation and self-confrontation. It can feel like something inside me is changing and it's pulling up old emotional material as it moves. The growth edge is learning to hold emotional intensity without letting it override your sense of self. There's also a reality check happening around your thinking patterns, communication, and mental environment with Saturn in your third house, and your work, health, and daily routines with Venus in your sixth house. This can show up as mental stress tied to work or responsibilities, difficulty communicating needs clearly in daily life or at work, overthinking routines, health, or productivity, feeling emotionally disconnected from daily structure, needing to restructure habits or communication patterns. Venus in the sixth house wants ease, flow, and harmony in your daily life, but Saturn is challenging that, asking, are your thoughts and communication patterns supporting your well-being or reinforcing stress? This transit reveals where mental habits are directly impacting physical and emotional health. The full moon is illuminating community, friendships, and future vision in your 11th house, and activating creativity, joy, romance, and self-expression with the sun in your 5th house. This can show up as clarity around friendships or group dynamics, shifts in creative direction or personal expression, tension between belonging and authenticity, realization of who actually supports your individuality, emotional clarity about where joy is nurtured versus restricted. The moon in the 11th is highlighting your place within community and collective spaces, and the sun in the 5th is emphasizing personal joy, creativity, and self-expression. So the question is, where am I shrinking my joy to belong? And where am I being asked to be more fully seen for who I am? Something around friendship, visibility, and creative expression is coming into emotional clarity. So very on theme with this week's episode. All three of these transits are restructuring your relationship to identity, emotional safety, and communication and belonging. Underneath all of that is a core shift. You are learning where emotional patterns, mental habits, and group dynamics have been shaping you, and where you are now being asked to actively choose a more aligned version of yourself. This week asks for honesty in how you feel, clarity in how you think, and courage in how you express yourself within both private and public spaces. Okay, Aquarius, that is big stuff, but this week's episode is very on brand for you, so you got this. Okay, Pisces, you're always so patient. This week activates your mind, subconscious patterns, self-worth, creativity, home life, and public direction all at once. There's a strong undercurrent of inner pressure surfacing through communication, emotional security, and life direction. There is intensity building between your thinking, communication, and daily mental patterns with Mars in your third house, and your subconscious mind, emotional undercurrents, rest, and hidden fears with Pluto in the 12th house. This can show up as racing or obsessive thoughts that feel hard to turn off, heightened anxiety or mental overstimulation, unconscious fears surfacing through communication or triggers, difficulty sleeping or processing mental emotional overload, and feeling mentally pulled by something beneath your awareness. Mars in your third house wants to act, speak, and process quickly. Pluto in the 12th house brings buried emotions, subconscious material, and deeper psychological patterns up to the surface. It can feel like my mind is reacting to something deeper that I can't fully see yet. The growth edge is slowing down reactive thinking so you can separate your intuition from anxiety-driven mental loops. There is also a reality check happening between your self-worth, money, stability, and resources with Saturn in your second house, and your creativity, romance, joy, and self-expression with Venus in the fifth house. This might come up for you in pressure around finances, affecting your ability to express yourself creatively, questioning whether your joy or creativity is practical, insecurity around worth in dating or romantic expression, feeling blocked between pleasure and responsibility, and needing to restructure spending habits or priorities. Venus in the fifth house wants play, love, creativity, and emotional openness. Saturn in the second house is challenging that, asking what is actually sustainable for you and what is tied to fear around your worth. This transit often exposes where joy has been unconsciously linked to validation, money, or stability. The full moon is highlighting your career visibility, direction, and public identity in your 10th house, and your home, emotional foundation, and inner world is being activated with the sun in the 4th house. This can manifest as clarity or culmination in career or life direction, emotional awareness of work-life imbalance, shifts in professional roles or visibility, tension between external responsibility and inner needs, and realizations about what actually feels emotionally sustainable. The moon in the 10th house is bringing attention to your external life path, and the sun in the 4th is highlighting your private emotional world and foundation. The question here is, what am I building in the world? And does it support the life I actually need internally? Something about direction, responsibility, or visibility is becoming emotionally clear. All three of these transits are restructuring your relationship to your mind, your worth, joy, emotional safety, and direction. Underneath everything is a core shift. You are being asked to stabilize your inner world so your thoughts, creativity, and direction are no longer being driven by hidden fears or instability. This week highlights where mental patterns, self worth, and emotional foundations need more support so that you can actually move forward with clarity instead of internal tension. Okay, Pisces, it's a big week, but you got it. I have faith in you. Love this for you. All right, you guys, that brings us to the end of the Zodiac. Thank you for listening. I hope you found some value. Let me know if what you experienced this week feels in alignment with what we chatted about here. Also, let me know if you need any help figuring out what your rising sign is and how to listen and integrate what we talk about here into your life. With that, make sure you listen to this week's episode, and otherwise I'll see you next week. Okay, Illy, bye.